Hello, and welcome to our first of 4 episodes of what we call Agency Brilliance. My name is Bill Reeks, and I lead a company called the Gramercy Institute. We are a think tank for senior marketers from major financial firms. And as most people will understand, the agencies and how they snap into the work of the financial marketer are of the utmost importance to not only the outcome of what they do, but also to the results that the marketer is able to achieve. That said, we have focused our agency brilliance series into 4 different buckets. Today, we are fortunate enough to be talking with a team of leaders from various different agencies on the subject of creativity in financial services marketing. So all of our questions today are going to be focused on the creative product and the creative processes that make the work that get the job done, and specifically through the lens of financial services marketing. Now, I think you all knew that, but now that I think most of us are all in our places, we'll begin. Before we do, I do want to let everyone know that there is a Q&A button along the bottom of your screen, and I am delighted to take questions from people along the way. So just use the Q&A button, if you will, and we will do our very best to get to it. We might not be able to get to all. And then I think what we shall do is begin. What I'll do is I'll ask, rather than go through everyone to introduce themselves first, panelists, let me mention who we have, and then I'll address the first question to the first person and have that person then give us a little bit of a synopsis of who they are, tell us about your agency, etc. So who we have with us today is we have Jill Deardorff from the company that bears her name, Deardorff. We have Paul Leibowitz from the company that bears his name, Leibowitz. We have Nancy Schulman from Sullivan, and we have James Maxwell from Teamspirit. And we will, as I say, I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves as I address them first with their questions. So that being said, Jill, I'm going to focus on you for the moment, and I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then I have a question for you, okay? Oh, you're on mute, Jill. There you go.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world today. I'm honored to be here and talk on what, for me at least, is my favorite topic, creative and creativity, and to be with this wonderful group of colleagues and friends. I am President and Chief Creative Officer for Deardorff. We are a full-service brand agency, recognized for our creative. We have a deep financial services practice. We work across the industry with asset managers, an advisory channel, particularly with RIAs, with fintechs, and so a broad range of target audiences from B2B and B2C. I would say that from a creative perspective, our value prop, and I was thinking about this, Bill, like when I looked at your questions, our value prop is informed thinking infused with wildly imaginative ideas, moves business forward in a measurable way. And so I think that, at least for us, creative is baked into how we operate. And, you know, as we all know, that's what goes out into the market space, right? And ultimately is a business or a firm's foot forward, their position and the results that they attain. Very, very excited to be here today.
Well, Jill, thank you very much for joining us. I so appreciate it. Let me ask you a quick question about your background. Now, your title says president, but you yourself come from a creative background. Is that right? And how involved are you with the creative product that your company delivers?
Great question. So my background, I'm a writer and a photographer by trade. So perhaps that's why I love creative so much. And of course, the writing finds its way into not just creative campaigns or thematic programs, but also into strategy as well. I think that my background, and because of the way that we as an agency work, great ideas can come from anybody. I would say that I am not as involved in the execution of creative as perhaps even personally in some areas I would like to be, or that I used to be. But I am involved significantly in the strategy setting portion of it. And of course, like with the writing and the photography, brand development, strategy setting portion of an initiative, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and it's so fun. Your passion does bubble over, and I appreciate and I respect that in you and what you do. Let's get to your question first. Look, and this is probably a question that's come up before. Now, there are some financial marketers who choose to handle their creative executions on their own. Some of them also choose to handle at least some of their executions by an internal agency. My question to you is what, and I'm presuming you believe that it is, why is it better for a financial firm specifically to go to outside help as it relates to their creative product?
This was actually one of our favorite. We met internally as an agency on the questions, Bill, and this was one of our favorite questions because, I mean, we believe that a client knows its business better than we ever could, right? Because they live it and breathe it day in and day out. And certainly there are some amazing internal creative teams, and we collaborate with them. I think at the end, when we all talked this through, we decided that perhaps the difference is in risk-taking. Because as an agency, and it's informed risk-taking, but great creative comes out of experimentation. I believe it's rarely revolutionary, it's usually evolutionary, and that people on a team can push others to evolve it and make it even better. And it might be harder to do that internally, to take those types of risks or to experiment the way that we experiment, because you're a creative team or a creative agency within the context of a financial services firm or a fintech or an advisory. So I think it may come to creating the culture that allows informed risk-taking to produce breakthrough creative to get the results that a client wants in the marketplace.
Yeah, Jill, that is a great response to that question, and I thank you very much for that. I'm going to move right now over to James Maxwell. James, I'm going to ask you the same question. I might drill down to something deeper than that also. But James, let's begin though with telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your agency Teamspirit, if you would.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm going to apologize to start with. I talk really quickly, so I'm consciously trying to slow myself down. I have a tendency to talk with my hands, as most creatives do. So if I look a bit wild and out there, that's probably why. So I'm James. I'm Executive Creative Director here at Teamspirit. I've been here a very long time. I think I've been in the agency over 18 years. I must have only been 10 when I started. But we are a fully integrated full service agency, very similar to what Jill was talking about. Actually, it was a lot of similarities when you were talking. You know, we do creative, we do brand, we do a lot of PR, reputation work, and obviously digital. We're based in New York and in London, and next year is our 30th anniversary. Which is amazing. So we've been doing this quite a long time. And I think talking about why we do what we do and our USP, I always say the clue is in the name. we believe in a really collaborative effort. You know, you don't get a good result unless you're really good at working with people. You know, I have never believed in just coming in and dictating what creative may be. My team may say something different about me, but that's my philosophy anyway. I do think it's a group collaborative effort with clients, with planners, with creatives, and you know, with their customers as well. I agree with you, Jill. You need a creative leap and a bit of risk taking, but I think you can only get there if you're all going to get there together as well.
James, thank you so much for that. Let me ask you just sort of a follow up to that. So, if part of your your core differentiator is found in your name, meaning the team, are there instances from a creative point of view where something like a newbie to the team or even an intern or something could come up with an idea that ends up really driving an initiative?
Oh, absolutely, and I agree. I mean, there's nothing worse than being on a panel when everybody just completely agrees with each other. But I 100% back what Jill was saying. Good ideas come from anywhere. I think that the trick within agencies is to know when that is a good idea. That's where the experience comes in. That's where all the years of the grunt work of being at the coal face really makes a difference. When you can all go, that's what it is. That's great. And then I think the really hard work begins actually in having to craft something. I'm a big believer in craft, in that I think great ideas are amazing, but to make them work in such a complicated environment, media landscape, so many levels that you have to sell something in, the really hard work in agencies, I think, comes in the crafting of something and making it absolutely solid and tight, so that anybody can understand it and it's not overly complicated. So I think, yeah, anybody can come in, and I would encourage everybody to have ideas throughout the agency. We really do believe in having sessions with clients. We really do believe in encouraging everybody to think differently. But I guess it's that how you take that and make it work is the next step. And that's, to your point, Jill, actually, sorry, I'm going to keep agreeing with you, but it is true, is that environment that you create, the creative environment, has to allow for that as well, which is where it can be different when you're working within an organization, let's say, where things aren't necessarily designed around that approach, and that risk taking. And FS, as we know, isn't exactly, there's only a limited amount of risk you're supposed to take at any one point.
Yeah, James, thanks so much. Let me ask you a derivative question from what I asked Jill. And is it always appropriate for a marketer, and specifically a financial marketer, to have an outside creative team working with them or the group? Or there's some instances where it might make sense for a marketer to simply keep it in-house?
I would also depend. I think it depends on the project and what you're trying to achieve. I know that sounds like a very diplomatic answer. I mean, I would obviously, and you know, I can see my CEO behind me saying, "No, always go with the agency." But the reality is, it depends on what you're trying to achieve and where you are in a journey. You know, I talk about a creative leap, and sometimes to make that leap, you need to not be part of the herd within the organization. That can be quite difficult, because if you are within an organization, I think what can sometimes happen is you already anticipating all the no's. You've been told no so many times on this email design and that bit. It's very hard to just feel like you're backed up enough to push through it. Whereas an agency has sort of been given license to not worry about that to an extent. So I think pick your battles in terms of what you use your agencies for. I think we've worked with both. We work very closely with a lot of creatives and some big names and their internal agencies, who I think are brilliant, and working really closely with them. But I think sometimes if you need something to come from the kind of the outer lane, let's say, and from a kind of a side sweep, that's where agencies can really help in that respect, because they're not bogged down in the day-to-day. They don't know every nuance necessarily of your business, and who's going to say no first and who's going to kind of cut it down. They don't need to. So in a way, you kind of leapfrog over some of those issues, and you've given them license to as well. So I think, yeah, if you need that creative leap, I think that's where it comes in really useful. I think when you're getting into, I don't want to say the day-to-day, but let's say production, and you know where you're heading and you're already agreed, then your internal agency is absolutely brilliant at that.
Yeah, James, thank you so much for your thoughtful response to my questions. Let me scoot on over to you, Nancy, if I may. First, I'm going to ask you to please introduce yourself to us, Nancy, and tell us a little bit more about Sullivan, and then I have a question for you. Oh, you're on mute.
I was so good about being on mute, I forgot. Hi, I'm Nancy Schulman. I'm a partner at Sullivan and Chief Client Officer. And I have to thank Bill for including me because my functional trade is a strategist and not a creative. So there'll be a good debate here. But we believe, or I believe, that, you know, the best strategists are great creatives, and great creatives are really good strategists. So having come from some bigger agency environments, there are no silos and walls, and we also don't care where the idea comes from and believe that we can both sides can contribute to great creative work. Sullivan's a brand marketing firm. We establish brand platforms at the corporate division product level, messaging, value props, but we also do a lot of customer engagement. So doing digital campaigns, websites, sales enablement, especially in financial services where there's a lot of, you know, intermediaries, and work with employer brands.
Nancy, great. And when was Sullivan founded? It's been around. I've known it for quite some time.
34 years ago. You can do the math. And I've been here 17 years.
That's wonderful. Well, listen, welcome to this panel. And let's get on with it. I have maybe a new line of questioning for you. Now, look, I've always, or people have said, you know, and in fact, when I first started in this business, you know, from a creative point of view, people didn't really go work on the financial account. You know, they wanted to do more consumer packaged goods or automotive or travel or something really exciting. But my question to you is, I've always been of the thought that, you know, perhaps you got to be even more creative when you're talking about the financial category to really pull and differentiate and make it make sense. But let me ask you that line of question. How creative do you need to be in financial, and do you need to be more creative than perhaps in other categories?
I think it's harder because we're a commoditized, you know, industry. It's often an intangible product. It has consequences, so it really matters. We don't all understand all the products and services that are being served up to us, you know, huge diverse audiences. So I think there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to tackle. You know, if you're selling, and I don't put this down in any way, bubble gum, because I think, you know, that's a challenge too, but there's a certain age group and audience that you're attracting, and we need to think about, you know, a wider universe. And also just the whole regulatory compliance environment. So just, you know, there are a lot more challenges in terms of what we need to tackle and our ability to be creative in the industry.
That's a great response. And, you know, you sort of sparked interest from me in what you said about, well, let me put it this way, in that you need, like, there's so much regulation that is guiding what you can and can't do. You can't just say, this is the best bubble gum, right? Or these Pampers are the driest, you know. You just can't promise. There's all sorts of restrictions saying you can't, you know, you can't be promissory in nature. And then on the other side of it, you have everyone doing that, you know, that sea of sameness in their advertising and marketing. And how do you thread that needle and you know, just work your best to work the magic?
Well, you know, I think I have, unrelated to financial services, I worked on a firm that erected and sold space on cell towers. Okay, and you know, I would tell you that to this day, it was probably one of my most exciting and favorite clients, you know, mostly because of the clients that you got to work with and their ability to, you know, push the envelope and take risks. So I think that we're always, you know, thinking about how do we differentiate, how do we engage, you know, how do we speak the truth, and you know, it is very possible to be very creative within financial services. And I love it. I think it's more about, you know, your team and really your client, and the ability, as someone said earlier, you know, to let you take risks and open up the aperture.
Yeah. Nancy, thank you so much for that. Let's move on to you, Paul, if I may, Paul Leibowitz, and I will ask you to first introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your agency.
Thank you. Very happy to be here today. It's nice to see everybody on the panel. And I'm Paul Leibowitz, President and Chief Creative Officer of Leibowitz. I've had the company for 33 years. We're here in Manhattan, and we specialize in financial services, but we also do quite a bit of work in higher ed and also technology. We work with Charter, Spectrum, also a lot of human services companies, health homes, et cetera. But our primary focus is on finance. And within that, we do a great deal of work with asset management, wealth management, private equity, hedge funds, and insurance. So we run the gamut, some fintech as well. And 16 people, and we keep everything in-house when we can, but for the most part, but we're full service. The only thing we don't do is PR. And so I'm happy to say that. I am a designer by training. I was the class artist in school, so it was very natural for me to go to art school. And I love the idea of this topic because creativity is just at the core. You know, I wanted to go to art school. I love the idea. I hang out with artists. So it's like messaging, just the way to differentiate companies is through creativity. And, you know, getting ahead of your question, you know, in the sea of sameness, there's 16,000 investment vehicles out there, right? How do you differentiate them? So creativity. You have to connect to the audience in some way, and especially in financial services where this is their livelihood. It's not Pampers. If someone has diaper rash, you get a new diaper. This is retirement money. So you can't mess with that. So you have to build trust. And that's what it comes down to. And how do you build the trust? With a connection and creativity.
Paul, that's a great response or great introduction. And I have a question for you about process that you've sort of triggered in me. So given the fact that you may have several in-house financial clients at any given time, what's the process that you and your team take in order to really get to the root of what should be their creative platform and message?
Oh, we have this, I can't say it's patented because I'm sure everybody uses it, but it's a 5-step process of research, which drives strategy, which drives content and design, which informs implementation. And then of course, the 5th step is evolution. You know, where do you go from there? And this sort of answers the first question about, you know, why stay in-house or not. So my favorite part of the process, even though I'm a designer and I love all the tools, typography, imagery, color, is the research. I like to talk to the stakeholders and find out what makes them different. And why keep the job in-house? Because you'll talk to someone who's been sitting next to each other in the office for 30 years, and they will have a slightly different point of view as to what makes that company tick. So when we do a go-to-market strategy, when we do a core messaging strategy, we take all the different sides and we align them. And that helps drive the strategic document. So all the soldiers are marching together, and that sets the strategy and informs the creative. And from there, you know, we write the content, which everything drives back to the strategy and the research. We also look at competition. You know, what are they doing? You know, we go as deep as like even in SEO. What does the competition own? What kind of keywords do they own? What space can we play in? And that's how we solve that creativity. So, and that drives the content and design. And as I said, as a designer, I'm not a designer. I don't design anymore, but I look at a lot of it, most of it. We have a fabulous creative director, been with us a long time. We have a stable team. I think we have a good culture, and I trust my people a lot, but I do get involved in the final say. I definitely, and I love all the presentations.
Yeah. Paul, that's great. And thank you for both your introduction as well as, you know, getting to the heart of how you do what you do so well. So thank you. Mixing it up a little bit, let me move over to you, Nancy, if I may. And I want to talk about something that, excuse me, comes up quite a bit lately, and that's AI, artificial intelligence. And I'd like to ask your opinion of its long-term practical use in our industry, specifically as it relates to creative, but also maybe the day-to-day of are you guys using it right now, and what's the best way for agencies to utilize artificial intelligence for all that it should be utilized for?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and I think we're all in the process of working with it and figuring it out. I say yes, I think it is here to stay. It gives us a new canvas to work with, which I think is, super exciting. I remember, the days where, websites didn't exist and now we're working in them. I also think that, even from a creative perspective, it can give us a lot of information in terms of, personalization, messaging, creative variations, thinking about different personas. So it is a huge positive tool for us to take advantage of. Obviously, we're all trying to learn how to make the most of it. And, it is only as good as the data that's in there. So it's still being built on at the very moment. But I think that, look, it is not perfect and it can lead you down the wrong path. But for the most part, I think it offers us a lot of learning and improvement in how we're going to market.
Yeah. I think that's a very practical response to this question. You can't, it seems to me, you can't ignore it. And at the same time, we don't know where this is going to bring it. Do you at Sullivan then, will you utilize it with some of your clients as you're preparing creative and conceiving ideas, et cetera?
I think the strategists will use it to, start doing competitive. So there's a lot of different places where it comes in. I think we're definitely using it in terms of analytics and measurement and trying to think about, different ways to speak to an audience and how might the language change. We're also using it as a company to help, our processes and make us more efficient and building out different kinds of chat channels right now.
Nancy, thank you so much for that. James, I'm going to move to you with the same line of questioning, if I may. What do you guys feel is the ultimate, where could AI take us as it relates to creative and specifically through the financial lens? And then, of course, what are some of the limits?
Yeah, I mean, if I told you I knew the future of AI, I would obviously be lying. And I think anybody who tells you they know the future of where this is going, they don't. It's just so new and so fast, you just can't predict. I think from our point of view, I think where we found it to be most useful, and exactly what Nancy said, the tools and the uses of it and accelerating things and giving you succinct answers is really good. Obviously, you can get swayed. Where we have found, which I didn't anticipate, is where we've used it, which has been really great, is the sell-in. So, for example, we've had a vision of what something could look like. We want to do a shoot, and we've got these amazing bubbles, and we want to put kids in the bubbles, and then we'll do. In the old days, he says, in the old days, trying to visualize that and project it and trying to help somebody understand what it could look like, and to people who aren't necessarily in the creative field, that was a big push, and it took a lot of time, and then you had to resell it into somebody above them, and you had to go through the whole rigmarole of me doing a kind of like an action motion thing of what could happen, and doing a stand-up comedy routine almost. Suddenly we've been using Midjourney and visuals, and it got brought to life in front of us, and we were like, well, that's it, that's exactly what we want to recreate this. So to take it to a client, we literally sold it in on a campaign in the last 2 weeks that we'd been working on for a few months, and the campaign looked exactly like we had produced using Midjourney, and that was a revelation. It was like, oh, we can save ourselves time just going around the houses trying to explain something where I can just show you. But then we took it and made it in the real world. And I think that for me would be the sweet spot. If I can use it to sell an idea in, but I can still use conventional shoots and real people and actual kids and actual videographers and all of those things to create something, but I haven't wasted months trying to explain it. I think that would be, for me, the great spot, because you still want to work with people. I think the downfall, I think on FS specifically, and this is one of my bits I keep explaining to clients, is twofold. One is authenticity. Well, so I'll start with trust. One is on trust. This is an industry that is based on trust. You have to trust us to take your money. You have to trust us to do all these things. And there's a reason financial services was navy blue for so many years, because it was trustworthy. And loads, with fintechs coming along, we broke out of that, thank goodness. And we trust the newer and the more exciting brands like to help us. But I think fundamentally, the worry with the AI is how trustworthy is it if I'm thinking imagery here, artificial imagery and artificial people to you day in and day out. Is that really trustworthy somehow? Do these people I'm seeing really represent my future of my retirement? It's very artificial. So that makes me nervous. And then also linked with that is authenticity. We try and be authentic FS brands. We're trying to be more human for a lot and not seen as so cold and so rational. And then suddenly we're using, AI to kind of cut the cord of the humanity. And I think maybe in FMCG, they won't necessarily have the same problem. But I think with FS, there is very much this undercurrent of we still need to be very human, because we'll be the first people to be accused of being inhuman. And I think we need to be very careful of the trust that we've managed to rebuild up since, say, 2008 over time. You wouldn't want this to be the next time that the trust level crashes, because we're putting out too quickly messages and executions and visuals that aren't necessarily real. That's my things that are buzzing around in my head at any rate.
Those are all great responses to this overarching question, and I love your perspective of the practicality of the internal use, right? Of the picture this value of AI, where we're all aware that this is artificial, right? But please envision this, and that is so much of the part of your work on an agency side, is getting people to understand before you do the work. Because if you do the work already and then it's done, right? You have to. So to be able to do it that way is to me really bright. And then of course your point about the two points about authenticity and what was the other? Trust. Yeah.
Trust.
Well done. Yeah. So thank you, James. I'm gonna scoot over to you now, Jill, if I may. I'm gonna let you, if you'd like, to respond to the AI question and where you see the value of AI, not only today but tomorrow. But then I have a slightly new thread that I'd like to begin, if I may, as well. So why don't you, if you would, just respond to that first part of our question together, and then I'll move on from there.
So I agree with what Nancy and James said. I agree with the trust. We do use AI. So we use it on the front end for like fast brainstorming, just generating, on-off strategy, even though you feed it what you want it, but still the ideas on-off strategy, just lists of ideas, thought starters. And we've also used it and worked with asset managers on prescriptive initiatives where there's a need to create originally, not through AI, create original narrative or language, maybe about a family of funds, for example. But then over time, as more similar funds are being developed and launched, once this database is set up, that asset manager can deploy AI and utilize the base narratives that we've created, essentially not needing the agency for that again, right? To create the next generation of description. And then the third area that we use it fairly extensively in is what James described, which is in visualization. And I would say for us at least, and it's experimentation. However, we have had instances like James has described. We've also had instances that it's just been so off base. We're like, oh my goodness, how did it even come up with that, right? And so that's also part of the learning, because we fed it and going back and examining what we fed it, we fed it with something, or there was something in there that was really tiny that got taken out of context. and blown up visually in a much bigger way than what we had intended. Nevertheless, I think AI is transformative in our industry and in the world, and that in a year or two from now, like everybody is going to be leaning heavily or more heavily, if you're already working with it, more heavily into it. And find like the best use case for it in, you know, in your business and for your clients.
Jill, thank you so much for that. And let me dovetail now into a different line of question, if I may. Something we mentioned earlier today about the nature of financial services cannot be promissory in how you convey the value, right? I mean, I mean, there's restrictions and laws even against doing that. On the other hand, you know, I've seen so many asset management ads, for example, of, you know, the artist painting on the beach or the vineyards of Italy, and in other words, suggesting that this is if you do this right, but they all seem the same. So my question is, talk to me about the challenges and how you get over these hurdles of differentiating clients in financial services and while fitting into the parameters that I described.
So the idea of like the sea of sameness, I think it goes back to the brand. So even though we're all working in the same category in financial services, each brand within financial services has different attributes attached to it, operates differently, has competitive advantages, and ultimately and ideally needs to inform a contemporary culture. And I think the combination of the competitive advantage of a particular client or firm and how within the context of their brand and their culture, they can inform a contemporary culture. So be relevant and be credible and be authentic and, you know, push forward in today's world. I think that for us, at least creatively, is like where we play the game. So it has to be still within the guidelines and the voice and the tone and the manner and all that of the brand, right? But what can you do to bring this to life in a different way? And, you know, of course, I'm back to what Paul said. I mean, it definitely comes out of research. You know, it comes out of these nuggets to, you know, what James and Nancy about strategy. It comes out of like competitive and finding like the space that nobody else has. It comes out of, you know, like imagery, like, you know, and maybe that is where there's an advantage potentially for AI there, but it comes out of imagery as well, like so that it isn't, you know, for retirement necessarily, like, you know, kick your feet up on the beach, right? What can you envision for your client or envision for your client's clients that will make them stand out in the marketplace and resonate with their investors or, you know, end users in a way that is relevant and future oriented at the same time. So, I mean, it's magical. Like that's, to me, like that area is where the magic happens. And it's fun.
Yeah. Jill, thank you very much for chiming in on both questions. Paul, I'm going to ask you both of these questions to answer in your own way, if you may. The first is about the practical value today and the future of AI. And then I'd like to get into a similar line of what we were just talking about with Jill.
Okay, well, I agree with James. I have no way of predicting the future of AI. And, you know, some people say it will never replace storytelling. Who's to say? You know, 150 years ago, who was going to replace the horse? I mean, like, here we are. So I can't say that. In our agency, we use it every day. As Jill said, imagery, you know, we're doing a campaign for Syracuse University now, and they're targeting the military, to get someone in fatigues at Syracuse University campus. Yeah, I could draw that, but like no one does that anymore. But, you know, we can generate storyboards like that. So, or, you know, if you want to put a grill on top of a washing machine, easy to do, right? Editorially, we're working on a go-to-market strategy over the winter for a long-only U.S. equity company. And, you know, we did our process, we did our research, we spoke to stakeholders, we did a 100-page core messaging document. When it came time to do the messaging, you know, the go-to-market messaging, writers and strategists, we brainstormed and we had some great taglines. And for, you know, hey, what would happen if we input our document? And you know what? The tagline that was selected was AI generated with a little bit of help from us. And I was, what's the word? Shocked, sad, I don't know. Maybe just because I've been in the business 33 years, but then I went with it. And it's like, you know, it was really good. And I just said, you know, we would have come up with that sooner than later, you know, so made the team feel good, but it's fine.
That is a great story. And I particularly find humor in the fact that you said you were shocked and sad because right, it's like, what does that mean about me? But
Well, yeah.
anyway,
But we would have come to it sooner or later. I know that. Yeah. But and the second question, I'm sorry, I forget.
Oh, the second question was really about differentiation within this sea of sameness, given the parameters that you are operating in within financial services. How do you do
As I mentioned earlier, like, you know, 16,000 investment vehicles. What does it come down to? Culture, people, process. What I find, and I agree with Jill 100% on this, is brand. You know, we approach it from a brand first standpoint. You know, we do product marketing, but first you have to step back. Do you like the restaurant before you go in and you order the specific dish? You've got to like the whole environment. And what I see, I call it the brand gap, because the internal perception of a company rarely aligns with the external perception. And if we all think in our heads our favorite brands, chances are there's that internal and external alignment. But I know we're all thinking in our heads, like maybe there's one or two we can think of, like Hershey's or Coke or Apple, whatever. But in financial services, I don't know too many, and I'm not going to mention names on it because whatever, but I don't know too many companies that are really truly in alignment. And as you go in and you talk to stakeholders and you find out what they're trying to say, and messages evolve over time, and that's no one's fault because not everybody rebrands every year. But it's a good idea to take that inward look and say, all right, so how has our messaging changed? How are we adapting to these new situations outside? Is the economic climate different now than it was then? Is this war going to impact us? So you have to look at these things all the time and ask yourself these questions. And that's how you sort of merge this brand gap. So yeah.
Great. Paul, thank you so much on both questions for responding. My next question is one for James specifically because it's come in from someone in our audience. Of course, and if anyone wants to chime in on this, great. But let me read it for you. It is, what are the key differences in selling creativity to global clients versus domestic, I presume?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, I think there's this thing, it's interesting when we talk because although for those who aren't aware, I'm sitting in London currently, our experience is all pretty much the same. So there is definitely I can say that word properly, a universal truth that permeates all FS marketing and creativity, I think when it comes to trying to have global clients and you're sitting with them maybe in one location, but you're trying to come up with an idea that you know needs to go London, New York, Sydney, Singapore, Hong Kong, LA, Salt Lake City. I think the interesting thing is going back to the sea of sameness. How do you come up with stuff that's going to stand out everywhere, but also be universal and not just appeal to kind of the lowest common denominator, if that makes any sense? And I think that's the real nub of the craft bit, I think, which is you've got so many different offices and so many different places and so many different stakeholders. How do you find something that is a truism everywhere? And Paul, actually, it's interesting, your process you were talking through is something similar we do with, we've got to call it something differently, but that really get to the nub of something before you even go anywhere near what it might, how it might roll out. And on a global basis, I think the other thing is also to then take into cognizance, it's got to be a universal truth, but it has to be a universal truth executed locally. So, and that's really hard, to be honest. There's no easy way of doing this where you need the local market, say, to roll that idea out the best way that they see fit. You've got to have the confidence that they can do it and not and make it consistent still, but have their own flavors of quote. And I think the way we've done that in the past, interestingly, is doing a lot of things like playbooks, where we come up with, guys, this is what the idea is. everybody understands it like this. This is how it can be brought to life. This is a video that really explains it. Here's your golden threads that go through everything. Like, you know Salt Lake City better than we do. You know your business there better than we do. And you know, if they say, if it's a financial advice firm in Salt Lake City, you know what your local market's potentially like and what messages resonate with them. Take this and apply it as best you can. And then we have a lot of regular catch-ups and check-ins with the markets. And I think that goes back to maybe what I was saying earlier about collaboration. There's nothing worse than command and control from a central point, whoever you are, agency or client, just like, take this thing and just apply it to your market. Well, it's not necessarily going to work. I think there is a thread of, anybody when it comes to money and finance faces a similar thread of thinking, but it's not executed in necessarily the same way. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was useful to have asked a question, but yeah, that's kind of how we think about it.
It was useful to me, and I'm presuming it was to our audience as well. And I really appreciate you. If anyone would like to chime in on that, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you. But if not, I'll move on to another question, if I may. And reminding you all, audience members, if you'd like to submit a question, just do it through the Q&A, if you would, the Q&A toggle. Nancy, we're all getting older, right? And that's a...
why did you address that to me?
I included we. I'm getting older. You're not. For some reason, you're not. But aside from that, we all out there in this world are getting older. And that's one thing you can count on. And as such, financial services products are maturing as well and attractive to new sets of audiences all the time, especially as it might relate to asset management, to retirement, et cetera. I guess my question to you is, how do we keep up with this? And are younger audiences now sort of demanding new strategies and new creative executions that never really would have flown before? Or does history simply repeat itself? So that's really the line of my questioning.
Yeah, we are getting older, but I think our business is getting younger. Mm-hmm. And the financial services business is getting younger. And I think that we need to wake up. I would say our clients need to wake up that, money is going to move and there are new ways of doing things. People want service differently. There are different channels available. And I think that as an industry of financial services, we're still focused on the baby boomers, and we really need to shift to, up and coming generations. So that doesn't mean we're not going to service, the boomers who are still holding the vast assets, but transfer of wealth is happening, and a different way of interacting, different kinds of service is essential. So I don't think there's been a big enough mind shift to thinking about the up and coming generations as still the continued focus on, the boomers today.
Yeah. Nancy, thank you. One of the things too that I've noticed is that target audiences are getting younger, but they can be very young. I mean, like, different from when I was a kid. Completely different. You can have 14, 15, 16-year-old kids with, online brokerage accounts, and they play it all the time as if which was in my day more like, swapping baseball cards, right? So my point is, are there efforts made to really young audiences to bring them in now with the idea that the lifetime value of a customer is always a good thing?
I think yes, and I think a lot of us are focused on education. Yeah. And really understanding. I mean, this is a worthy topic to be studied and understood, and I think there's a lot of, I'll call it like edutainment in financial services. So I think we definitely need to think about how do we engage at an early age. And again, the brand needs to continually evolve to service these newer and younger generations. I mean, staying static is not going to work.
Yeah. Nancy, thank you so much for responding to that question. Jill, let me scoot to you if I may. And I want to ask you about the changing shape of media. I mean, like, there's no doubt how much media, we don't need to go into that part of it. It's for another panel. But how much media has changed in the last 10 years. But my question to you is, how about creative in reaction or in response to the changes in media? Has that required creative messaging to change? And maybe could you explain some of those changes?
Sure. Thank you. And Nancy, I loved your answer. And I do think part of it is also driven by the combination of what you and Nancy were just talking about, Bill, because I don't know if it was 2022 or 2023. I think the most people retired, right? So there was the biggest shift from accumulation and retirement to distribution. And then at the same time, you know, on the advisory side, like we see the rise of robo-advisory, right? Which speaks, I mean, some of them speak to specifically that younger millennial, even younger millennial audience, and you can see it in their creative. And so the media piece of it, I think, has evolved as well. I mean, we do quite a bit of work in social media across platforms, so including TikTok. And I mean, we have definitely seen in our practice, in our business, and with our clients, the rise of the use of rich media, whether it's not talking head video, but storytelling videos, whether it's animation, whether it's a series, back to this edutainment, a series of perhaps educating on ETFs, like a particular, you know, product class, right? In an entertaining way, and then utilizing that and repurposing it so that it works, not just plug and play. So, you know, if it's vertical, you know, for TikTok, or repurposing it in a thoughtful way so that it works across social media platforms, so that it works in digital outreach, and so that maybe like a different extended version of it is on a landing page or a microsite that everything drives to, if that makes sense. So I would say for us in media, the biggest explosion has been much more emphasis on digital, including social, and much more emphasis on creative rich media, not just talking head rich media.
Yeah, Jill, thank you so much for explaining that to us. I'm going to scoot over to you now, Paul, if I may. And you know, this will probably be the last question, believe it or not, but I want to get to everyone in their response to this. Paul, what's your favorite creative work in financial services these days? And does anything come to mind, whether it's from your own shop or whether it's not? And I'd like you to explain why it might be your favorite.
As much as I like a clean slate, and if a company comes to us like a startup and says, hey, you know, let's just, sky's the limit, I find it more fun and more challenging to do a brand refresh. Talk with stakeholders, people who understand what they've been doing, help establish the goals, help establish the strategy, which then can drive the visual identity. And, you know, does the company need a haircut? Do they need a new suit? Do they need a facelift? You know, these are the things that we kind of dive in and see. And, you know, the devil is in the details, God's in the details, whatever the phrase, but like really getting in there and saying, how do we nuance this? How do we, as I mentioned earlier, how do we bridge this brand gap and move them forward? Because companies, you know, things evolve, and it's time to do that. So that's my favorite part. And coming in and refreshing the logo, not necessarily starting over. We start that way, and then they realize, well, maybe we want something new, but you have to go that route first, and then we do something brand new, and that's good too. But you have to educate and bring clients along, I think. Yeah.
Does any, and again, I realize that you have a work in progress, but does anything stand out that you've worked on, and as an example of this? And again, it's okay to say, Bill, I can't really, there is, but I can't talk about it.
You know, I can't really say. I think a good success story we did like a couple of years ago was Wasatch. They're out in Salt Lake City. You mentioned Salt Lake City. I was curious why you said that, Jim. You know, they were perceived as this US only asset manager. It turns out 52% of their their funds were emerging markets and foreign. So, when we did our research and asked people what they thought of them, that was it. And their visual identity kind of looked like a beer can, like Busch beer. It's just sort of like the mountains, and it just, they came to us and said, sky's the limit. What do you want to do? And I said, well, let's step back and let's interview everybody first. And we ended up interviewing 40 people within the company, and it was quite the couple of days. And that's how it's tone. And we came up with this idea that they really were, and you've heard the phrase, we've all heard the phrase, Wall Street, not Main Street, Main Street, not Wall Street. So these people said they were Main Street, but they meant it. They truly meant it. Like, they don't watch any of the chat shows. Their TVs they're very athletic, have snooker, football, whatever. The head of sales played for the Patriots. There's none of that squawk box TV. They really were their own. And because they're in Salt Lake City, they said, we don't go to cocktail parties. We do it our own research. So I branded them as sort of like mad scientists. They do it themselves. And, it dialed back from there to peerless, but we started that high and we ended up going down. And I think it was a success. And
it's a great example, really. Yeah. That's your starting point being that of mad scientists. Terrific. Thank you, Paul. James, I'm going to ask you the same question. Are there any creative executions or perhaps work that you've done, or perhaps work that you just see out there that you really admire? And I'm curious as to why.
Yeah, it's difficult because you gotta like picking your favorite child. I think the one I refer to when people ask, what have you done recently? And the only reason I refer to it is because I think we're all in the business of using creativity to make a change. And what I mean by that is I don't just mean to the bottom line. I actually mean the industry that we're in, and I say financial services, does affect people's lives, and it is important. And I totally agree with what you were saying earlier about how important it is, and it's important to get it right. And that's maybe why the risk is always a bit, we can't go too far. And the campaign I'm referring to is that we did that. We took the risk with the client, who is a kind of a semi, what I would call it was a whole group of different pension companies, life and pensions companies here in the UK, and had all got together to say, we need to make a change. How do we do this? They came to us and said, what do we do? And we, instead of going with loads of ideas, we were like, we know what we need to do. We're going to do one big thing and make a change. And we came up with a campaign called Pay Your Pension Some Attention. It was all about lost pensions and how important it was. And instead of trying to be rational and very long copy, it was all bright and bold and used really visual. First, we used a famous rapper here in the grime rapper in the K, and he was a presenter, and we got him to do a video. Sounds a bit cheesy, but it really cuts through. And the reason we did it, and I loved it, was because it actually did make a massive difference. And that's the type of work that I like to see from the whole industry, is not just, we have to put an ad out. So here's like an ad. It almost feels like it's just part of a media ticking box process. It's like, well, what you do makes a difference to people's lives. Let's see that. Like, how are you doing to fulfill that? And I think any brand that goes out there and does that, whether it's on investment or life and pensions or retail banks, when they really get into the nub of it and they realize you're changing people, you can help someone's life get better, and they really go for it. I think that's the work I really like to see. And doing it, to all your points earlier, in a way which isn't just traditional media, and actually thinks about how we best going to reach these people in the best way. So anybody doing that. An example here in the UK, by the way, also if you want to look them up, who I do love, unfortunately we don't work with them yet, is a company called Pension B. I just love the way they go about everything. It's just light and airy, and really it makes a joy of what they do, really. So there you go.
Yeah, no, great. And I certainly will take note of that. And Pension B. All right. Thank you. James, great response. And thank you for that. Nancy, I'm going to ask you now to chime in on the same line of questioning in terms of work you admire out there, whether it's your own or whether it's just out there in financial.
So, I'm loving, when we talk about the effect of, new media, just the ability to have more immersive experiences, interactive experiences, be willing to use humor in some way, visually, pushing the envelope. So especially like we're working with some fintechs, and we've been able to like, you know, branch out a little bit more. So that's been exciting. And very recently, we rebranded a wealth management firm of independent advisors, and it gave us a chance to have a completely blank slate. And if you look at, that's called, the firm is Osaic now, it was the advisor group. And visually, and the tone is so different from, you know, our traditional wealth management firms. And it's light and relatable and relevant. And, you know, just talks about, you know, I think mutual success between the advisor and the investor. So there's a lightness to it that, you know, is joyful.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, in this world today, it's nice to engage me in a fun, interesting, and joyful way.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be so serious. It's important, but it doesn't have to be so serious. Nancy, thank you. And Jill, I'm coming to you, my friend, with just a thought, asking you for a thought on this because we've run over our time already. But does anything stand out, whether it's your own or out there in the industry, as excellent financial creative that you'd like to share with us?
So I would say quickly, from our perspective, we do quite a bit in retirement marketing. And so even within that category, if you were to look at the work we've done for JP Morgan, Invesco, Lazard, BNY Mellon, I mean, all retirement marketing, each so distinctive and different, love it all, and love helping people achieve outcomes, better outcomes there. And then I'd say in category, the thing that interestingly I'm really liking right now is from BlackRock. If you check out BlackRock's Tax Center, they have found a really crisp, simplified way to communicate to advisors how to help their clients achieve after-tax savings. It's not something we did, but I like the simplicity of it and the boldness of it.
That is great advice, and I'm sure our audience will take note of that. Jill, thank you so much for your responses. Panel, you guys have been awesome. This has been a fun conversation, and I will say a great way for me to spend an hour. I really have enjoyed this. Jill Deardorff from Deardorff, Paul Leibowitz from Leibowitz, Nancy Schulman from Sullivan, and James Maxwell from Teamspirit. You guys rock. Thank you all so much. Audience, thank you very much for sticking with us. I brought you over by a couple minutes, but not too much, I hope. And thank you for your questions. I will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.